Good evening, and welcome to the U Talk Show. We are but two men trying to change the world, trying to make it equitable and just for all. But as two men, it's a little bit of a sausage fest. My father, bless his dumb, demented soul, used to say that it was always good to enjoy a good sausage in the mouth, but that's not what we were really going for with Man Week. We wanted to address the problems facing men, and we had to couch things diligently, carefully, because there are so many people who just want to watch the world burn and enjoy setting us against each other so that we can never solve our problems. And Kyle had some thoughts about that, and I'm going to hand over to him on that because I think I've sort of given you the primer.
Yeah. So I had some extra thoughts kind of because I had and have this itch. Um
You should see a doctor
basically
about that. That's also good advice for every man about out there. You have an itch, go see a doctor.
yeah. So essentially there's meant to be a week of episodes to help men, particularly young men who find themselves in coming into a world where they don't have a role in society that is clearly defined or even there for the most part. Used
Mm-hmm.
to be that, men were a provider, that was their role in society. Women were the homemaker and raising the children. And I'm not saying that that was, better, but it was clearly defined. People kind of knew what was expected, and going against it, could be done, but at least it was there. It was sort of a standard by
So
which to measure oneself.
I was always taught in art and in basically every science that in order to figure out how to break the rules effectively, you have to know what they are to begin with. And I
Yeah,
think that's
yeah,
sort of
that,
like
yeah,
if you were a woman who was a working professional in the 1970s, um, you're a trailblazer.
mm,
And it was an abnormal situation to be in. But there was this idea of structure, there was something that you were in society. And in the same way in the 70s, if you chose to be a house husband, if you chose to devote your life to taking care of the kids and making sure that dinner was on, um, again, that was a departure from the norm. But the problem is that the way I see it, with all these possibilities opening up, greedy capitalists decided, hey, we get to screw over both halves of society.
yeah, yeah. But thing is, what kind of irked me when we were recording that first episode, where you mentioned much the same thing then,
Hmm.
is that we had to spend a third of that episode just essentially priming people, gearing it towards um, ensuring that it wasn't labeled or seen as something that was um, anathema to current views. You know, because society has been already primed and trained to essentially with identity politics. We see, men being pitted against women, women against men, left versus right. Um, you know, like any like race, religion, gender, sexuality. To talk about the issues of the gender of men in of itself is almost seen as like it's the fact that that is even seen as political is
It's
just
seen as,
strange if you think
I mean,
about
the
it.
other problem is it's seen as a bit self indulgent, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's the thing. If you do the same thing with women, it's not seen as self-indulgent, at least by most of society. And that's part of what irked me is that we had to spend that third of an episode where we really like the episode was titled an honest look at men at our problems, that is men's problems. And yet we had to spend a third of that episode essentially depriming people from that societal attitude that corporate media has put in their head.
Yeah, I still think that a huge part of this is the necessity of divorcing ourselves from a certain amount of toxicity. Like
Hmm.
as I said to you previously, we have to be sure that our words aren't twisted. We have to be sure that they aren't used to advance an agenda that we both find abhorrent. And part of that is necessarily sort of just putting a million bloody disclaimers on things, because
Hmm.
we live in a society where absolute fuckwits feel emboldened to make trouble where there is none. We live in a society where people will try and find any information to support their views instead of trying to adjust their views to fit the information. We live in a society where there is, and I said this in an earlier attempt to do this particular video, there is no shortage of bloody morons. There are people whose entire identity is tied up in being angry on the internet. They don't want to solve problems. They just want to be angry and have
Hmm.
people validate and reaffirm their anger and not have to think too hard. And when we try and compete with those fundamental social forces, we have a great deal of difficulty honestly assessing our problems and how we might solve them, because we are so busy being tied up in making sure that we don't make it worse.
Yeah, and one thing I'd like to say about those people that you were describing is those like I see the world in or I'm beginning to see the world in that there are a few in such ways that there's a few kinds of people. There are builders and producers, and then there are destroyers and parasites. Those people are destroyers. The wealthy elite that corrupt politics are the parasites, and the rest of us need to be builders and producers. We need to produce something of value for society, and we need to build up society and those around us.
And there are some things that should be destroyed. And it's a good thing that we have people who are absolutely willing to go to bat for that. But I think when certain people only really have the skill set of being destructive, eventually they run out of things to knock down that are actually useful. But they have all this
Mm.
mental energy, and they just have to keep what was it, tilting at windmills.
Haven't heard that one before. Sounds interesting. You'll have to explain it to me at some point where it comes
Don
from. That
Quixote belonged in a psych ward.
that one I do know.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, that yeah. I will say this though. I think that I now, although I kind of felt it back then when we were recording that first episode, I now no longer believe that we have to cover ourselves. I think that I'll agree with everything you said just then, but I think that we no longer have to and we no longer should. I think it's a waste of time. As long as we're not
I
saying anything terrible, as long as we're not putting out anything that's terrible into the world, I don't think we can reasonably, and I do stress reasonably in that sentence, be misjudged.
There are three rules for legal interpretation. It's relevant, I promise. There's the
I
common
can see
sense
where you're
rule.
going.
There's the common sense rule. That's what do the words mean? There's the golden rule, which is what did the people who made this law intend? And there's the mischief rule, which is not really used in legal interpretation, but is more used in writing the law. And that is, how do we make sure that our words cannot be perverted? How do we make sure that creation of this law does not simply provide an avenue for further injustice? I think to a certain extent we do still have to take reasonable precautions
Hmm.
against our words being used to carry an injustice.
Yeah, I think
But
perhaps in
at the
that
same
regard
time,
demonstrate what we mean.
yeah, at the same time, I said it before, I'm gonna say it again. We're two guys. We want to fix the world. We want to make a world that is just and equitable, where everyone has the opportunity to make of their life what they wish, without fear or favor or corruption or isms standing in their way. We can't do it alone. If you are a person whose entire identity is around getting angry on the internet, then you're not our target audience. And we can accept that you probably won't like what we have to say, but we ask you to scream about it elsewhere. If you want to make a just and equitable world, and you want to design policies, laws, talk about the ideas, please reach out to us. We are two guys. We are doing this in our limited free time. We want to fix the world and we can't do it alone. We want you on board. We want you all on board.
As I used to say on very many of the fundraising calls I used to make for charities, it's about a collective effort. Everyone chips in a little bit, and we can do something amazing. And with that, we'll let you go. Have a good one.
Good night, everyone.